Somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, depending on which genetic study you read and which researcher you ask, a wolf walked toward a group of humans and did not get killed. That single moment, or rather a series of moments exactly like it repeated across thousands of years across multiple continents simultaneously, is the origin of every dog that has ever lived. Every golden retriever, every chihuahua, every slobbery Saint Bernard who thinks it is a lapdog, every police dog, every guide dog, every dog sleeping at the foot of someone's bed right now at this exact moment, all of them trace back to a wolf that chose to come closer instead of running away. What happened between that moment and the animal currently sitting on your couch eating your socks is one of the most extraordinary biological and social stories in the history of our species. And almost everything most people think they know about how it happened is wrong. Let's start with the version of the story you probably learned. Humans found wolf cubs, raised them, selectively bred the friendly ones, and over time produced dogs. This version is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong in a way that completely misunderstands what domestication actually is and how it actually works. The version you probably learned positions ancient humans as the active agents, the deliberate breeders, the architects of the domestic dog. The actual evidence suggests something considerably more interesting. Ancient humans did not domesticate wolves. Wolves domesticated themselves. Here is what the evidence actually shows. Ancient human campsites produced waste, enormous quantities of it. Bones, scraps, discarded food, the accumulated refuse of groups of people living in one place long enough to leave detectable archaeological layers. Wolves are highly intelligent, highly adaptable, and highly motivated by food. The wolves who were bold enough and calm enough to approach human campsites to scavenge from this waste had access to a reliable and substantial food source that wolves who were too fearful to approach humans did not have. The bolder wolves ate better. The better-fed wolves survived at higher rates. The surviving wolves reproduced and passed on the behavioral and physiological traits that had made them bold enough to approach humans in the first place. No human planned this. No ancient person decided to create a new species. A food source existed near humans, and the animals best suited temperamentally to exploit that food source selected themselves out of the general wolf population through a completely natural process over thousands of years. Let's bring up what happened inside those self-selecting wolves, because this is where it gets genuinely remarkable from a biological standpoint. When you select for tameness in animals, specifically for reduced fear response toward humans and reduced aggression toward humans, you do not just get tamer animals. You get a constellation of unexpected physical and behavioral changes that appear together as a package deal that nobody ordered and nobody expected. Floppy ears, curly tails, spotted or piebald coat patterns, smaller overall body size, shorter snouts, rounder, more baby-like faces, earlier sexual maturity, reduced skull size and brain volume, retention of juvenile behaviors like play and vocalizing into adulthood. None of these traits was selected for. They came along for the ride attached to the tameness trait through a mechanism called pleiotropy, where selecting for one gene affects multiple unrelated physical traits simultaneously. The process of becoming friendlier toward humans rewrote the entire biology of the animal in ways that nobody intended, nobody planned, and nobody predicted. Let's bring up the Russian fox experiment, because this is the most dramatic scientific demonstration of exactly this process ever conducted. Starting in 1959, a Soviet scientist named Dmitry Belyayev began selectively breeding silver foxes at a research facility in Novosibirsk. The only selection criterion was behavioral. Each generation, he selected only the foxes that showed the least fear and aggression toward humans. Everything else was random. No selection for appearance, no selection for size, no selection for anything except friendliness. Within 6 generations, the foxes were approaching humans voluntarily. Within 10 generations, they were seeking out human contact and showing distress when separated from humans. Within 20 generations, they were functionally indistinguishable in their behavior from domestic dogs. And accompanying all of this behavioral change was the exact same constellation of physical changes seen in domestic dogs: floppy ears, curly tails, piebald coat patterns, rounder faces. The foxes had not been bred for these traits. They had appeared spontaneously attached to the tameness selection like uninvited passengers on a train heading somewhere else. The experiment is still running today. The foxes have been continuously domesticated for over 60 years. They are the strongest evidence we have that the domestication of dogs was not something ancient humans engineered. It is something that happens automatically when the right selection pressure exists. Let's bring up what ancient humans actually contributed to this process, because it was not nothing, it was just not what the textbooks usually say. Once proto-dogs, the self-selecting intermediate wolves, were already partially habituated to human presence, humans began to recognize that these animals were useful in ways that were quite different from any wolf. They could detect threats at distances, and with sensory acuity that no human could match. They were faster than humans over short distances. They could track prey in ways that complemented human hunting strategies. And critically, they were motivated to cooperate with humans in ways that wolves simply are not. This cooperation did not require training in the modern sense. It emerged from thousands of years of coevolution, where dogs and humans each developed behavioral and neurological adaptations that made working together natural. Dogs evolved the ability to read human social cues at a level that even chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, cannot match. Look at a dog. Point at something. The dog looks where you pointed. Do the same thing with a chimpanzee. The chimpanzee looks at your hand. The ability to follow a human pointing gesture is so deeply wired into domestic dogs and so absent in wolves and other great apes that it appears to be a specifically co-evolved trait. Dogs were built by evolution to understand humans in a way nothing else on Earth could. Let's bring up something that most people have never considered about what this relationship meant for humans specifically. The domestication of dogs was not just useful in the practical sense of having a hunting partner or an alarm system. The presence of dogs almost certainly changed human social and cognitive behavior in ways we can barely measure. Having an animal that detected threats before humans could free cognitive and attentional resources for other things. Having an animal that tracked prey changed hunting strategies and outcomes in ways that likely affected nutrition and group survival rates. Some researchers have argued that the dog-human relationship may have given early modern humans a competitive advantage over Neanderthals in Europe, who did not appear to have domestic dogs. This remains controversial, but the possibility that man's best friend may have played a role in the extinction of our nearest relative is the kind of fact that tends to sit with you for a while. Let's bring up what happened to dog domestication once humans figured out that the process could be steered deliberately. For most of human history, dogs were broadly useful generalists. Then agriculture happened. Settled communities had sheep and cattle that needed protecting. Hunters needed specialized tracking dogs, specialized coursing dogs, and specialized retrieving dogs. Human societies developed sufficient complexity that dogs could be specialized for specific roles, and humans began deliberately selecting for those specific abilities. The result over the last several thousand years is the extraordinary diversity of dog breeds we have today. A greyhound and a basset hound are technically the same species. They are more physically different from each other than a lion is from a tiger. The entire visible variation in modern domestic dogs, the vast range from Chihuahua to Great Dane that looks like it should represent multiple species, was produced almost entirely in the last few thousand years through deliberate human breeding, and a significant portion of the modern breed diversity we recognize today was produced in a single century-long burst of Victorian-era dog fancying that essentially invented the concept of a dog breed as a formal category. And here is the thing about that Victorian burst of breed creation that you should probably know. The intense inbreeding required to establish stable breed characteristics in a short period produced hereditary health problems in many breeds that are now deeply embedded in the genetics of those populations. The flat faces of bulldogs, pugs, and French bulldogs that we find so appealing because they are baby-like and human-readable are the same faces that cause those dogs chronic breathing difficulties. The enormous size of Great Danes, which is so impressive, produces skeletal stress and a lifespan of 6 to 8 years. The drooping skin and eyes of certain hound breeds that give them their distinctive melancholy appearance cause chronic eye infections. The very traits we selected because we found them aesthetically pleasing or emotionally resonant are frequently the traits causing those animals chronic discomfort. We took the animal that domesticated itself to be our companion across 40,000 years, and in the last 150 years, we managed to breed suffering into its most recognizable forms. The wolves who first walked toward ancient campfires did not see that coming. How did ancient humans actually domesticate dogs? They mostly did not. Wolves domesticated themselves by exploiting a food source near humans. Ancient humans noticed the result, found it useful, and began to participate in a process that was already underway. Together over thousands of years, humans and dogs co-evolved in ways that made each better adapted to the company of the other. And what began with one wolf walking toward a fire in the dark, not being killed, and coming back the next night, became the most successful interspecific relationship in the history of life on Earth, which is either a beautiful story about the unexpected emergence of genuine cross-species companionship, or a story about how a wolf figured out where the food was and just kept coming back, depending on whether you prefer the romantic version or the honest one. Personally, I think both are true simultaneously. And I think that is what makes it one of the most interesting stories there is. Before I go, I want to know something specific from you. What do you think your dog is actually thinking when it stares at you? Not the cute answer, what you actually believe is happening in there. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.